Welcome everyone to this event, Building Trust and Effective Collaboration Across Cultures. My name is Sofia, Achame, and I welcome you all on behalf of the organizers, Think Africa and Hofstede Insights. Before we start, maybe we could have some house rules. It would be good if you could have your videos on as much as possible and turn your mic on when speaking. And remember to mute your mic once you're done speaking. You can write your questions on the chat and we will try to answer it as we go along. And perhaps if there's a lot of questions, maybe some more at the end of the program. Since we are live streaming, if you don't want your name to be shown on Facebook Live, you can change your name to something. And for those watching us on Facebook Live, you can also write your comments and questions there, and our volunteer Fien will be able to forward it to us. Okere will be leading this event, and I will let him introduce himself to you after a while. First, I will introduce Think Africa, one of the organizers of this event. Think Africa is a non-profit organization working towards enhancing collaboration between the Finnish society and people of African background here in Finland. We also strive to make social and economic impact by empowering the African diaspora living in Finland and also building effective collaboration between Finland and African countries. At the moment, Think Africa has about 78 members from 22 different countries over 3 continents. And this week we have Think Africa Week, which is our flagship event. And this year's theme is the Africa We Want. We have borrowed this theme from African Union's Agenda 2063. And this document states that the African diaspora have a key role to play in the development, sharing knowledge, mobilizing expertise, technologies, and economic resources in African countries. Of course, this in part involves creating opportunities for interaction and collaboration among collaboration in order to break stereotypes, as well as addressing the social challenges faced by the African diaspora in Finland that seem to hinder effective interactions. The other thing that the document states is that our diversity, African diversity in culture, heritage, language, and religion can be a cause for strength also. With this in mind, this event focuses on understanding and managing cultural differences to increase trust and effective collaboration. And Okere will say much more than this and explain to you about this title. And I will let Okere introduce himself now. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sophia. And thank you everyone who has joined in today's program. It's a pleasure to be here. This is our agenda for today. But before we get into the agenda for today, of course, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Okere. Okey is short form for Okechukwu, for those of us who are familiar with Igbo names from Nigeria. So I am from Nigeria, and I am the CEO, regional CEO for Africa for Hofstede Insights. I'm a management consultant, and I have a passion for understanding culture and also examining culture and its impact in the workplace, in organizations as organizational culture, and also when you have multinational teams working together. The other areas of interest for me are strategy, business analysis, investment promotion, finance, information technology, and of course, program management as well. A little bit about Hofstede Insights. We are an organization that is committed to this saying from this quote from Professor Geert Hofstede. We are committed to the survival of mankind working together. We want human beings to understand each other better so that we can work together to save our planet and to save humanity, as it were. Professor Hofstede said the survival of mankind will depend to a large extent on the ability of people who think differently to act together. So we started in the Netherlands approximately 35 years ago in 1985, but right now our HQ is in Finland, and from here we operate in 63 countries, and we have over 160 partners spread across. We have over 5,000 clients spread across various countries as well. So this is just a bit of information about what we do and all about us. Why are we so passionate about culture? Well, we see that culture tends to be a challenge for organizations or teams that have people from different countries. Cultural differences often pose a significant barrier for effectiveness for multinational teams. Executives that were interviewed by PricewaterhouseCoopers a few years ago said that cultural differences account for about 65% of the challenges that they face. And another research done by KPMG showed that whenever companies go abroad to acquire other companies, only 17% of the time do such acquisitions actually add value. In other words, you tend to see that when you internationalize, it tends to erode value or make you less effective. So these are some of the reasons why we are so passionate about helping people to understand each other, especially when they work in multinational teams, so that they can work more effectively together as a team. So for this session, we expect that at the end of this session, you will be able to explain, at least in your own words, why cultural differences exist. We also expect that you will be able to describe the most likely issues that you will face when you're working with people from some cultures different from yours. And then we also expect that you will be able to identify some of the personal changes that you need to make in order to work better in an intercultural team. Now, those of us who are on Zoom, during your registration, you would have received information on how to obtain what we call the Culture Compass report. Now, that report we will examine a little bit today, but that report will give you specific information on some of the personal changes that you need to make so that you can work more effectively with people from other cultures. We're going to start with a group exercise, but before we dive into the group exercise, I would like to point out that if you have any questions or feedback, and I know that Sophia has already mentioned this, if you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to put it in the chat box in Zoom, or if you're on Facebook Live, also put it in the chat box as well. We have people looking at the chat box, and they will be able to highlight these questions, especially when we need to take these questions to help you understand the concepts that we're talking about better. So now I see that as it is, we have, I think, about 10 people, 10 guests in the group. So we're going to break out into two groups, and we're going to engage ourselves in a quick exercise. Now, this exercise will only be for those of us on Zoom. For those of us who are on Facebook, you will be allowed to share your views because you will not be able to get into a breakout room. But for those of us on Zoom, we will put you into two breakout rooms. Perhaps there will be about 4 people or 5 people in each room, and you would have this quick discussion. So, what do we want you to do in this quick exercise as we dive in? We would like you to take a picture of this slide. Please take a picture of the slide. I would read the slide, but please take a picture of the slide. And if you're on Facebook as well, feel free to also take this picture and try it out by yourself. So this is just a bit of an icebreaker to help us get into this session proper. So, you have been shipwrecked. You and other cruise tourists from different parts of the world, you were lucky to survive a shipwreck, and now you are stuck on an uninhabited island. No help is foreseen. For you to survive, you and the members of your group, that is the people in your breakout room, must now decide on how to organize yourselves. So we're going to give you 15 minutes to discuss how you're going to organize yourselves, okay? And after 15 minutes, I would like one person from each group to use only 3 minutes to tell us the following. First of all, tell us who the members of your group are, specifically what countries do they come from, and if the members of your group will permit, because we are streaming live on Facebook, if they would permit their names as well. Their first names might help, but if they would like to remain anonymous, then you can just talk about the countries of origin. So who are the people in your group? And then tell us the top 3 rules you have agreed in your group. What are the top 3 rules you have set? So when you have your discussions, agree on the rules and identify which of these rules are the most important. What are the top 3 rules? Rule number 1, rule number 2, rule number 3. You could have up to 10 rules, but what are the top 3? And then you can also tell us how did you choose those rules and why did you choose those rules. So again, after 3 minutes, we would ask you who are the members of your group, what are the top 3 rules you set for your group and why you chose those rules. If you don't have a mic, then perhaps you might be able to chat with your group members and contribute one way or the other. Perhaps it might still work. So, Elizabeth, are we ready to go to the groups?
Yes, really soon.
Okay. Okay. So while you're putting us in the rooms again, you've been shipwrecked. So again, please remember to take a picture of this slide. You can do that if you're using a laptop. If you hit your print screen button, you can do that and then you paste in Microsoft Word or in PowerPoint. Otherwise, of course, if you have a cell phone, you can just quickly take a screenshot by taking a picture of the slide. So it's important for you to do this so that you can refer to the slide when you break out into your rooms, because you would not have the slide available as well. And if you're on Facebook and you would like to participate, I know that you will not be in a group, but please take a picture of the slide as well, and then you can send in your comments on the Facebook live chat. So thank you. So we're breaking out right now. The breakout room button will have popped up on your screen. Please click on join and we will see you in the breakout rooms. I will be there for about 15 minutes. Thank you. So see you in the breakout rooms. Welcome back. So we will wait for the other group to join us. We will wait for the other group to join us. Faith, you will be speaking for your group, right? Super.
Okay, if you could recap the question for those on Facebook Live.
Okay. I will share my screen again.
Yes.
Thank you. So for those of us on Facebook, and those of us who are just joining as well, we put out this scenario. You've been shipwrecked on an island with a few other lucky survivors. No help is foreseen to survive. You and the members of your group on the island must now decide on how to organize yourselves. And we gave about 15 minutes to talk with the members of your group to decide on what are the top 3 rules to set for your group to enable you survive. Remember again, no chance of a rescue. So, and then tell us as well, how did you choose those rules and why did you choose those rules? Okay, so if you're on Facebook, we would love to hear from you. Please type in your suggestions and one of our team members would share with us what you have typed in. So we have 2 groups here with us on Zoom, and I think just want to check if everybody is here. Yes, everyone is here. And Faith, should we start with your group?
Yeah, no problem.
Super.
So first of all, I'll introduce the group. So there's myself, who is a British woman, but living in Germany at the moment. So pick whichever one you like in terms of countries of origin. Then we've also got Jenna from Finland, currently living in Zambia. Carrie from Finland, Kayu from Finland, but living in Senegal. And then Emma from Tanzania, living in Finland. So we were talking about the things that we wanted to discuss. So we first of all said that the important rule is to stay calm, because panicking doesn't help anybody and will probably lead to dissonance in the group, and that's not good. So if we want to be able to move forward and reduce the risk of not surviving, we need to be able to stay calm so that we can rationalize thought. Then the second thing is that we want to be respectful and inclusive and listen to each other. So there needs to be community rules in terms of how we deal with each other. And that takes into the consideration the context in which we're in and the fact that we need to work together to be able to survive, which leads into the next one, which is that everybody takes part in everything. So it's not down to a couple of people to work and everyone else sits around. No, everybody's got to work to ensure the survival of the group, and we need to pool our resources. So it's about teamwork, I suppose, that one. And we did have a fourth one, which was just quite fun, which is that we need to, well, I say fun, not fun in this situation, but that we need to ration food. And if food runs out, so does life. So it's very important that we ration food. So I suppose prioritizing needs. So we had 4. I'm sorry, we've grabbed an extra one there.
Would it be okay for us to hear the rules of the other group, and then we'll come back to you to tell us why you chose those rules? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to the other group. And Marco or Yusi or Sarah, who would like to tell us what you decided?
Okay, I don't know if I'm the best person to describe what our group did, but I will try. And please, other group members, correct me. Most probably, I will be describing something incorrectly. Anyway, that's my style. So we chose the 3, let's say, top rules. The first one being about communication. We must have a joint one understandable language, so that we can discuss and go through these different things. Then the second one was about that. Actually, this is a little bit different compared to the other group, that we started to think that we should define certain roles so that we can take into account the capacities that different people have in order to utilize them in the best possible way. And also some equal let's say, equality was considered here important at the same time. The third one was about conflict resolution. So how are we going to make decisions and define things? I have to say, though, after these were the 3 that we chose. We started from the thing that where can we get some food? That's actually the starting point. So in that sense, that is sort of left out. But anyway, so perhaps that's the 4th one. Okay, that's our group.
Thank you very much, Marco. Thank you very much. Could you please just let us know who were the members of your group?
Sorry, yeah. Okay. So we had Sarah from Germany, Fiyin from Nigeria, Sofia from Ethiopia, Frank from Kenya, Jussi from Finland, but living quite a lot in East Africa, and myself, Marco, from Finland.
Fantastic. Great. Now, let's go back to Faith's group. Faith, could you tell us why you chose, first of all, to stay calm, and then to be respectful to each other, and to make sure that everyone will take part in everything that is done, and to also ration food? Why did you choose those rules?
So we were talking about the fact that we've got to work together, that we need to be able to move forward, and we don't want there to be any situations where the risk of not surviving is increased. So by staying calm, we can keep things moving forwards. By being respectful to each other, we're more likely to communicate and be able to work together. So the teamwork is all about pooling resources for the benefit of the group. So in other words, we can actually make sure that and I think actually, Marco, you said this in yours as well, that we've got to see what the skills are for each person. So everybody maximizes their skills and then everybody benefits from it. And then obviously about the rationing is so that we can eat and survive. So there's kind of like, there's group dynamics, I suppose, in terms of how we as a group work together and survive without killing each other. And then there's also the practicality of we need to find food and water and shelter. And how do we do that as effectively as possible? So hence why we've got these rules to get those objectives and outcomes.
Super, super. And I would like to go again to Marco's group. Marco, why did your group choose the three things that you chose? Why language first? Why did you choose to?
Okay, actually, perhaps in order to give equal opportunities for others as well to say something, I might then hand over the possibility to say at least something about the language and communication to Sarah, because she was very much elaborating on that. I wonder if that's possible.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Well, I guess the language was brought up first, just in terms of speaking the same language, and maybe we were also saying not to speak in one's own language, one's own mother tongue, in the way that others can't then understand what's going on. And further, I guess, communication, we talked about giving everybody equal opportunity to say something. So sometimes in groups, there are people who are really talkative and they have a lot of ideas and they want to speak, and then the maybe more introverted people, they are a bit left out. So we said it would be nice to give everybody the space to say something if they would like to, at least, and then move from there. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Now I want to ask a question again, and now I'll direct this to anybody from any group. To what extent do you think that culture, your cultural upbringing, your cultural background, to what extent do you think that that played a role in the rules that you suggested? And anyone can just take this. I think I have some chats coming in as well.
I can comment shortly.
Yes, please.
I believe whether it's these rules that we created or in any other case, the background has got a big significance on what you think and do. We all have got a little bit different cultures and backgrounds. So one thing might be different to somebody else than it is to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously the cultural background would have played a role, right? In your view?
Yes.
Certainly, certainly. Well, I'll tell you, when I did this exercise for the first time, the first suggestion I made was that I said to everyone that we needed to set rules about sanitation. And everybody looked at me, I was like, wow, what about that? Well, it occurred to me that on an island, right, you needed to be careful so that nobody gets sick. Because if someone gets sick, then you could die, because we don't know where any help was going to come from. But when I checked my mind and I basically reflected on why I made that, I realized I live in Lagos, Nigeria. I am from Nigeria, and sanitation is a huge issue over here. So that was the first thing on my mind when I talked about the rules. So for Faith, when you said, I don't know, were you the one that suggested stay calm? So, who suggested that?
No, that was actually Emma that suggested stay calm.
Okay. So and why do you, Emma, why do you think you suggested for us to stay calm? Emma?
I think that whenever you're in such a situation, before you start thinking of anything positive, normally like people would start panicking, but to avoid wasting time on panicking and stressing yourself for something that you can't, I mean, it won't even help you if you panic. You'll just be wasting your time. So then that's why I thought, like, stay calm, you accept that, yes, I'm in this situation, and what next?
Yeah. And then we see the part about food. Everybody was concerned about food. So that's human nature, isn't it? So there's certain things that are common to all of us. If we don't eat, we're going to die. So let us take care of the food, and then let's also ration the food. And I think someone talked about, when you say you want to distribute food equally, what does that mean? What is equal rations? I think it was, I can't remember who made that suggestion. Was it?
It was Frank.
It was Frank, yes. So Frank talked about.
Yeah, it was interesting that we were talking about equal, and I think globally we have
Yes.
the use of the term equal on so many fronts: gender
Yeah.
equality, every equality. So we are so much pro equality, the terminology, probably because it sounds friendlier. But I'm encouraging, or was thinking more of an equity or an equitable approach. And equality and equity are actually different, in the sense that when we are talking of equally, if there is 6 of us, we will have 6 rations of the same amount of food. But
Okay.
the truth of the matter is, we all take different amounts of
Different
food
quantities.
to get to a
Yes.
level of satisfaction.
Exactly.
Basics.
Exactly.
So talking about equitable distribution would be more sensible, so that
Yes.
if there is 6 of us and maybe one is still a baby or a child, they're given some serving that's commensurate with that. And then if we have a medium-sized person, they also get a food side that's reasonable. And if we have a fairly endowed person, we also give them some food that's commensurate with that. A bit of being fair to everyone's actual equitable needs. So when we bring it to equality, of course it's standard, but it's ultimately not fair. And I think, yeah, that was really the approach, that we need to think more with an equitable lens rather than the equal one.
Yes.
May I have
Thank you so much.
may I comment something on that?
Yes, please.
Yes, I was thinking, just as you were speaking, Frank, then also who decides who needs how much food? Because I mean, there might be someone with a system that just really easily digests food, and they're hungry all the time.
Yeah, and
right. So it's a bit. I was wondering if it is more also then about trust in a way, to say that everybody decides how much they need, or somehow everybody's given the choice to decide how much do I need, and everybody has trust that nobody is exploiting the others. So it could even then go further beyond this equitable approach to something else. I was just thinking, but just as a note, yeah.
Very interesting.
I
Very
agree with you, Sarah. And actually, this is a tricky situation. And the thing is, we are having to deal with the social construct versus reality here.
Yes. Now,
the social construct, we could assume, size, and people could actually come with a bit of, I need double portion to feel satisfied or something, which might not be true. And this is one of those scenarios or situations I'd say, you cannot have an answer with finality. And so it's about a lot of being considerate and reasonable. And if being equal is the best way in that situation, that let's just agree that everybody gets the same serving of food, so whether or not it's equality throughout, then so be it. You cross the bridge when you get to it. But if there could be a mechanism for determining some sort of equitable portions, that, okay, we will use a standard cup. And so for this group, we will give them 1 cup of this serving, and for the other, we will give them 1.5 or something like that. It has no answer with finality, actually.
Yes.
But it's better to think more in the equitable approach, because then it comes out as a bit more fair.
Thank you, Frank. Really appreciate it. I see some other comments from Carrie, and I don't know if we have any comments from Facebook, but while Elizabeth and the other members of the team will check that out. Carrie says, for me, being Finnish and being an engineer, I looked at the practical, perhaps less the human side. The group must decide on the amounts for all, otherwise it will lead to conflict. It will lead to conflict. So a lot of issues were raised here. Who holds the power to decide how much each person will get? In fact, who holds the power to decide on what rules we will set? All of the things that we have discussed today will be connected, of course, to our upbringing, our outlook of life, which is practically shaped by where we come from and how we see life, how we see how power should be distributed. It's interesting that we all agreed that we must come to a consensus. At least one group said that everybody's voice should be heard. We need to define rules, another group said. All of these things are a product of where we come from and how we see culture and how we see what rules we should set. It's important for us to know That when we look at the world, we see the world through our own filter. What do you see in this picture? What's very common in this picture? If you just please text in the chat box, if you could just type it in the chat box. What is common in this picture? In all the pictures that the rhinoceros is painted? What is common? Just type it in there if you don't mind. The horn. The horn. And what is going on? Why is the rhinoceros putting the horn in every picture? Because the rhinoceros is seeing the world from that perspective. We all have a filter that we see the world from. We have a filter that we see the world from, and it impacts how we behave. Unfortunately for us, we are not always aware of how people see our behavior. We are clear on what we want to do. We are clear on our intentions. But then, oftentimes, our behavior, we are not so clear as to how our behavior is perceived by others, and the impact of our behavior on others as well, we are not so clear about. However, other people are not aware of our intentions, but they are very clear of the kind of behavior that they receive from us, and they're also very clear on the impact on our behavior. I see someone on Facebook talked about from the shipwreck exercise that finding drinkable water is much more important than food. Again, there's a cultural twist to that. I have a lot of interesting stories to share about that exercise, but because of time, I will keep them for now. Yes, so when we talk about culture and we talk about perspectives, it's always relative, isn't it? So what number do we have on the floor here? Is that a 6 or is that a 9? Is that a 6 or a 9? What do you think? It looks like a 6 to me, though it looks like a 9 to me. Well, you see, you have to put yourself into someone else's shoes to understand what they are looking at. And Carrie says it's not even a 6 or a 9, it's a G. Yes, it's not always easy to solve the problem because someone might say, okay, you know what? Let's put a dot under the number and then that solves it. We can easily tell what number it is. Well, what about when you have a situation that is complex? It's not just enough for us to be aware that cultural differences or different perspectives exist. We need to have tools to help us understand each other. Because when we understand each other better, then we can be able to work better with each other. Oftentimes, we would look at life and we would agree with the things that align with our own cultural upbringing. What is like our culture is normal and it's good, and what is different from our own culture, we will consider it abnormal and bad. And that cultural bias, where does it come from? It comes from our upbringing, how we have been brought up. Our childhood and our experiences in life will tell us what is good and what is bad. And if we see something different, rather than understanding that different action or behavioral pattern, we would just simply mark it as wrong or bad. Okay. So with that brief introduction, let's talk a bit about culture. What is culture? Well, this is a definition from Professor Hofstede, who unfortunately passed on earlier this year at the age of 91. He said culture is the collective programming of the mind that distinguishes the members of one group or category of people from another. This definition, there are a few words that I would like to highlight. The first one is programming. Human beings are programmed in a culture, but we're not programmed like computers. Because we are human beings, we can actually act out of our programming, which is good news for us. So basically what we're saying is you can leave your cultural enclave and go into another culture and decide to act differently from your program, even though your program will still influence your choices. It distinguishes the members of one group from another. Why is that phrase important? Well, you have to understand that when we talk about culture, it's always about comparisons. There's no good culture and there's no bad culture. However, you can look at your culture compared to another culture and you can see certain differences. And we'll talk a bit more about that. When we did this exercise, we all agreed that food should be rationed. And like Petra suggested on Facebook, we should also consider where do we get drinking water from and how do we ration drinking water as well. There are certain things in life that are common to everyone, and those things we will refer to them as human nature. There are certain behavioral patterns that we will see common to all human beings. We all mourn, for instance. We all get sad when we lose something important or someone important to us. We all mourn. We all laugh or are happy when something good or something we like happens to us. That is inherited. If a human being does not mourn when they are supposed to mourn, or does not laugh or rejoice when they are supposed to rejoice under normal circumstances, then we begin to wonder if there perhaps might be some challenges with that person. Then there are certain things that we learn. So we all mourn, but how we mourn is what we learn. So I will expect that people in Finland mourn differently from people in Nigeria. And why I know that is because even in Nigeria, with 350 different ethnic groups, the people, some of the ethnic groups in the southern part of Nigeria, they mourn quite differently from people in the northern part of Nigeria. At least I have seen that. And I know that across different cultures, we mourn in different ways. In some cultures, when people pass on and you're going for a funeral, you dress in black. And in other cultures, if you dress in black, it's like you're looking for trouble, because that is the wrong color to wear when somebody has passed on. You probably should wear white. Now, that which you learn as part of the group, we call culture. And it could be a group that is like an office or an organization or a project team, or it could even be a society or a nation. So we inherit our human nature, but we learn our culture. And then there's a part of us that is a combination of what we learn and what we have inherited. And we refer to that as our personality. So we are born as human beings, we are programmed within a culture, but then we have a personality. And because of our personality, we can act differently in different circumstances. When we go from one culture to the other, because of our personality, we can change our behavior. Okay, let's look at culture a bit more. What are the levels of culture? Well, if we peel culture as an onion, the most superficial part of culture are symbols of culture. And these are words, gestures, dressing, images, or objects that we use. The next level of culture will be heroes. And heroes are people, role models of society. They could be alive or they could be dead. They could also be fictional characters like Batman or Superman. So in America, for instance, the founding fathers of America, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, they will be referred to as the heroes of such a culture. And then you have rituals. Rituals are the way we transact, how we greet people, how we hold meetings, our manners, what qualifies as good manners and what qualifies as bad manners. All of those things are rituals. And also religion as well. And you can consider religion in any shape or form. Those are rituals. And then deeper than rituals are values. Values are really difficult to describe. They are why we feel strongly about certain practices. Now, it's important for us to understand this onion, because oftentimes when people talk about culture, they always will refer to cultural values. But we'd like to make a distinction between cultural values and cultural practices. The first three levels, symbols, heroes, rituals, we refer to them in Hofstede Insights and based on Hofstede's work, we refer to them as cultural practices. And we say that you will see these three both in society and in your organization as well. However, when it comes to an organization, these first three levels of culture, symbols, heroes, and rituals, are the most prevalent. You won't see values necessarily in an organization. And there's a long explanation for that. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to explain that in detail, but I will just give you the short summary. And basically, it is that the reason why you don't see values in an organization is because whatever the organization would construe as its values usually will be the values of its founder or its management, its key management staff. not necessarily the values of everyone who works in the organization at the time. Values are why we feel strong about certain practices. And values are very powerful when we're looking at cultures of different nations, because over time, the people of such nations or such nation groups or societies will determine the kind of practices that align with their values. Their values will help them choose practices. Their values will help them determine whether a practice is good or it is bad. And if we're going to change culture, also very important for us to know, the deeper we go, the more difficult it becomes. So symbols are easier to change than heroes. Heroes are easier to change than rituals, and rituals are easier to change than values. In fact, some academics believe that values can never change. That once values have been put inside you, once you have become, once you have passed puberty, it's impossible to change your values. Some people say that. So to help us understand culture, cultural values particularly, Hofstede came up with the 6D model, 6-dimension model, and we will talk about these dimensions in the following slides. Now, please understand that these dimensions, power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty, avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence versus restraint, these values, these dimensions basically are what Hofstede used in describing culture, for those of us who took the culture compass, and I don't know how many of us did that, perhaps you might be able to indicate via chat if you have done the culture compass and if you have your culture compass report. If you don't, then perhaps you could do that later. Yes, I see a few people have indicated that they have that. Good. So these terms have been described in the Culture Compass report. So it's one thing for you to have received the report. So let me ask another question. How many of us have read our Culture Compass report? How many of us have gone through it? Oh, Faith, and yes, okay. Sarah said I skimmed it, and Caillou said I read. Thank you. So Hofstede, what he did was that he compared nations on these 6 dimensions. He compared nations on these 6 dimensions. And this comparison, the comparisons that he made were based on extensive research. The research stretches all the way back to 1967. What they did, or Hofstede and his colleagues, what they did was that they scored different countries, they scored them between 1 and 100 on each of these dimensions. Please remember again that your score doesn't mean that your country's culture is good or bad. It's simply a measure of comparison to compare your country with another. Not that one country is better than the other, but that these are areas where these countries differ. Right? It's important for us to appreciate and understand these differences because cultural differences are a major cause of clashes between people from different cultures. Okay? When we don't understand why we see things differently, it's inevitable that we would have a culture clash when we work together. So let's talk about these dimensions one after the other. And if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in, and we will take these questions as we go. And if you feel the need to ask this question, especially if you're on the Zoom call, please let us know, and we might give you a few seconds to ask the question. So the first dimension Hofstede identified is power distance, and we will refer to power distance as PDI. Again, for those of us who have done the culture compass and those of us who haven't even done it yet, you can get more information about these dimensions in the report. So I'm not going to talk too much about them. Right? Power distance is the extent to which the less powerful members of institutions and organizations in a country expect that power is distributed unequally. So it's the extent to which the poor and the weak allow the rich and the powerful to have their way. So as you can see the diagram in here, you can see basically an outlay of power distance for about 101 nations that are covered in our survey. Right? Countries that are low power distance, usually those countries will be most of the nations in Western Europe, as you can see, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Most of the rest of the world is mostly high power distance. In low power distance cultures, you tend to be more independent compared to high power distance cultures. Hierarchies usually are only for convenience, whereas in high power distant cultures, it's important, it's extremely important to have hierarchies specified. In low power distant countries, you tend to have more equal rights for everyone, whereas in high power distant countries, there are some privileges for some people who have access to power, of course. Superiors are accessible in low power distance, or more accessible compared to people from high power distance societies, and decisions tend to take longer in low power distance societies. However, in high power distance societies, decisions tend to take quicker. If you want to achieve something very quick, it's easier to do it in a high power distance society compared to a low power distance society. And of course, when we talk about power, access to power usually is determined by your social status, your position, your wealth. In many cases as well, how old you are will determine how much access you have to power. That is power distance in a nutshell. Individualism versus collectivism. It talks about the dependence on others, the degree of dependence that a society maintains amongst its members. Countries that are individualistic or that score high on individualism, people tend to look only after themselves only and their family members. But countries that score low on individualism, which we will call collectivist or collectivistic countries, people tend to belong to in-groups. By in-groups, we mean their family, extended family, of course, ethnic groups, work groups, unions, labor unions. Your affiliation to in-groups will tend to be stronger compared to individualistic countries. And what does the group do for you? The group will protect you for your loyalty. So you're loyal to the group and the group protects you. So what do we see? In countries with low individualism, which are collectivist countries, you tend to see the word we more. People will think about working together more. But in the individualistic countries, you tend to use the word me more. Interestingly, the English language and the countries that speak English, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, of course, in the English language is the only major European language where the pronoun I is capitalized. In all other European languages, the word I usually will be in small letters, but in the English-speaking world, I is capitalized. Okay. In collectivist countries, the opinion of the group matters, so you work with the group. It's easier to form teams in collectivist countries as well compared to individualistic countries. And then communication is implicit for collectivist countries, whereas in individualistic countries, communication is explicit. So you say what you mean. We call that low context communication. In collectivist countries, that's low individualism, you tend to depend on the group a lot and you are concerned about losing face. And then also that's compared to individualist countries. And then also you try to avoid conflicts because being a part of a team and making the team work together is important to you. Again, compared to countries that are individualistic. So you can see the comparisons over there. These slides we will make available in PDF for those who would like to have access to them. Although, like we said, all of these are already in the Cultural Compass report and you can read them up all there. The next dimension, masculinity versus femininity, deals with the drive for achievement and success, which is masculinity, versus caring for others and ensuring that there is a better quality of life for everyone, which is a femininity. Now, when we talk about masculinity or femininity, it has nothing to do with gender. It's more about the drive for achievement versus caring for others. Masculine societies tend to want to be the best. They promote being the best. They promote winning at all costs. Whereas feminine societies tend to promote doing your best, enjoying what you do, all right, and trying to make sure that there is some level of consensus and equality. Let's all get there together. When you take a look at the world, most of Africa is feminine. A few countries in Africa, though, are masculine. Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya, particularly. Most of the other countries in Africa are feminine. A few of the Asian countries, China, Japan, masculine. Most of the English-speaking world is also masculine. The UK, Netherlands, not Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, the US, and Canada as well. Okay, masculinity. Countries that are feminine or that score low in masculinity, they are all about doing your best. We reward people who work with others, who seek consensus, compared to masculine societies where the winner takes it all. And it's all about competition, right? And then when they set objectives, they want their objectives to be clear and they don't allow their targets to be moved at all, right? It's the winner takes it all. Take it or leave it, okay? You tend to see that the Nordic countries are feminine. You would see, if you look in the map over here, you would see Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway. Nordic countries are feminine. Nordic countries are feminine compared to the rest of Europe. The Netherlands as well is mostly feminine, or comparatively feminine when you compare it to some of the other European countries as well. Uncertainty avoidance is the next one, and this one deals with how a society deals with the unknown. How does a society respond to a situation that is ambiguous or unknown, right? And what they have done in terms of their structures to deal with such situations. In societies that are low uncertainty avoidance, right? They don't really need so much structure and rules. They don't mind taking some more risks if it will guarantee them success. And they don't necessarily have to show their emotions when things go wrong, when things don't go their way. But for societies that are high uncertainty avoidance, what they tend to do is that they want more structure, they want more predictability. And then if things don't go their way, they tend to be quite stressed out and they show their emotions as well. And then they also prefer experts, unlike countries that are that have low uncertainty avoidance. And you can see from the map which countries are low uncertainty avoidance and which countries are high uncertainty avoidance. Across Africa, it varies. A country like Nigeria, where I come from, we are somewhere in the middle. We score about 55 on low uncertainty avoidance. Finland as well is somewhere in the middle as well. Finland is somewhere in the middle with uncertainty avoidance. And you can see the Finnish map over there. I think Finland scores about 46, and we will see scores for Finland later today. Which countries score high? Japan scores high. Germany scores high on uncertainty avoidance. The Netherlands scores high as well. France scores high. Russia scores high. Quite many countries in Latin America score high as well. The English-speaking countries, the UK scores quite low on uncertainty avoidance. And that was one of the reasons why I was asking if Faith was the one that said to stay calm. Because for those of us who know about the UK, there's always the stay calm and do this, stay calm and do this, the UK t-shirts and notices. So it's about, you know, carry on, just carry on. We'll cross the bridge when we get there. Okay. All right. Long-term orientation is the next one. Now, long-term orientation is it's a little bit tricky to understand this, but I'll try my best to make it quite simple. Basically, it talks about how you prepare for the future. How do you prepare for the future? Are you short-term oriented or are you long-term oriented? All right. So if you are short-term oriented, or we'll call it you have low long-term orientation, you tend to be normative. It's about here and now. Right? So if you were working with someone, you will be more concerned about their performance over a quarter. Whereas if you're long-term oriented, you tend to be more pragmatic. You take a long-term view and you'll be more concerned about their performance over 10 years. Okay? And you can see some of the comparisons over here. Societies that are short-term oriented, they tend to focus on absolute truth. It's either true or it's not. Whereas long-term oriented societies, they consider that you could have many truths over time. It could be true today, but tomorrow it may not be true. Okay. In short-term oriented societies, they tend to look for results immediately. But long-term oriented societies tend to persevere. Now, a good example of long-term orientation is China. as you see, for most of us who are aware, China has taken a bet on Africa, and they are investing in Africa with the long-term view that sometime over the next 30 years, Africa will grow and become more prosperous and be able to pay back. And I know that there might be political reasons for doing this, but that is the view that you would see, not just in China, but in many of the other countries in the Far East. But most of the countries in Africa tend to be short-term oriented. Nigeria is short-term oriented, Finland as well, comparatively short-term oriented compared to countries like Russia, for instance, and also Japan and China. And the same goes with the rest of the English-speaking world, and as you can see from the map as well, most of South America. And most European countries fall in between, but they tend to be either in the middle band or short-term oriented. Only a few countries, particularly Germany, as you can see with the map, are long-term oriented in Europe. Okay. And then the last one, indulgence versus restraint. How do you deal with natural drives? If something feels good, do you encourage for it to be done again and again and again and again and again? Or would you ask for people to restrain themselves? Okay. So how do you tell whether a society is indulgent or a society is a restrained society? Well, one way you can tell. In a restrained society, they would say work hard and don't play. Work hard, focus on your work, just work. As you can see, low indulgence. All work, no play. But in indulgent societies, what do they say? You work hard, and when it's time to play, you play hard as well. You work hard and you play hard. And you can see the comparisons as we go on. Which societies are low indulgence? Most of the Asian countries. A lot of this dimension has been attributed to the teachings of Confucius. So societies that tend to adopt the teachings of Confucius or other teachings from the East, Buddhist teachings, for instance, they tend to encourage restraint. Okay, and you can see from the map here, the US, most of Latin America, most of Europe, including Finland, Nigeria, and most of Africa as well, we tend to be quite indulgent. For indulgent countries, leisure is important. It's important for you to take time off and enjoy yourself. Indulgent countries tend to be more optimistic about the future compared to restrained countries. And indulgent countries tend to have the perception of control over their outcomes in life. They tend to spend higher, especially on beef and alcohol. They tend to be more extroverted, and they smile and laugh a lot, perhaps a bit loud as well. And they tend to be more informal compared to countries that have low indulgence. And you can see the map and the countries there. Okay. So this is from Carl Jung. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So if you feel that someone perhaps smiles too much or someone smiles too little, don't look at that person, look at yourself. First of all, it pays for you to understand the other person before you want them to understand you. Okay. So these dimensions have highlighted cultural differences that could impact the level of trust between people in different working groups. But let's talk a bit about trust before we close our session today. Let's talk a bit about trust. What is trust? Well, trust is assured reliance on the character, the ability, the strength, or the truth of someone or something. Can I trust you? Can I hold you to your word? Well, of course, many of us would almost immediately say that it is important for us to have a high level of trust when we work with people. There's a lot of research, as you can see, that testify that if there is a higher level of trust, your team members will become more productive, more effective. They will incur less waste and less costs as well. But then what is the relationship between trust and culture? How do they connect? All right? Let's talk a bit about that. In some cultures, people tend to trust others by default. They would trust someone until the person proves to be unworthy of their trust. And if you break their trust, it's quite difficult for you to regain their trust. All right? It's all or nothing. It's either black or white. It's full start or full stop. And you tend to see this happen particularly in countries that are individualistic, in the countries that score high on individualism, and also particularly the countries that score low on masculinity. So those countries that are high individualism and low masculinity, you tend to see that they trust you by default, but if you break that trust, it's almost impossible to regain it. However, these countries usually are just a smaller portion of the countries in the world. In most countries in the world, there is a time and a place component to trust in others. In other words, before we trust you, we need to know you, right? Regardless of your culture, whether you're individualistic or collectivistic, trust is driven by similarity. The more similar a culture is to yours, the more initial trust you will give. So we say from research that there is what we call a trust dilemma. Before trust is given, we must identify the various elements to that trust. There must be a truster, the person who gives the trust. There must be a trustee, the person who receives the trust. There must be an object of trust, meaning that I can trust you for certain things. For instance, you can trust me that I will be on time with this session. However, you may not be able to trust me that I can give you €1,000,000 by tomorrow, the object of trust. And then there is the context of the trust, the circumstances under which that trust is given, the culture that shrouds that trust, that enables that trust to happen. Okay, and that culture will depend on where we are and how we relate to each other. When we combine trust and the 6 dimensions of culture, it creates a very beautiful picture. Regarding power distance, the issue of hierarchy plays a role. We will trust people that have the power to do certain things. And again, especially with societies where there's high power distance, the higher you become, the less trust we place in you, because we feel that you are so far removed from us that we can't really trust you. In terms of individualism and collectivism, trust has to do with relationship. Individualistic societies can trust you without necessarily having a relationship with you at first. However, in collectivist societies that score low on individualism, we will need to know you first before we can trust you. In the case of masculinity, trust will depend on your track record. Not only what you have done, but how you have presented to us what you have done. Okay. However, in feminine societies, we will trust you if we will trust you not necessarily on your track record, but on how you are able to form consensus. So what we will say is we would like to not just hear about what you have done or read about what you have done, especially when you have blown it up on your CV. We would like to see that you are able to pull other people in feminine societies. But in masculine societies, you need to read out to us your CV and tell us what you have done. Okay? You need to tell it. You need to sell yourself, if I will put it that way. We will trust you if you're able to sell yourself very well. Carrie, I don't know if that answers your question about track record. Selling yourself. In masculine societies, you need to sell yourself. Regarding uncertainty avoidance, expertise will determine trust. Societies that have high uncertainty avoidance will trust experts more. Societies that have low uncertainty avoidance may not necessarily trust experts more. They might even prefer generalists, because in their view, experts might be too cocooned in their own field that they may not be able to see the impact of other factors. For long-term orientation, we don't have any clear trust connections, but for indulgence, it's all about your expression. In indulgent societies, we need you to smile. If you don't smile, we can't trust you. Whereas in restrained societies, if you smile too much, we wouldn't trust you. For those of us who probably have read the story of McDonald's in Russia, McDonald's had to change their approach to their service in Russia, because they would always advise their cashiers, the people who sell at their tills, to smile when they're talking to customers. But in Russia, they found that was counterproductive, because in Russia, a smile was not perceived the way it would be perceived in America. All right. So please take a picture of this slide, if you don't mind, and we will do a quick exercise before we close. And I'll just give you about 10 seconds to take a picture of this slide, and let's do a quick exercise. Of course, quickest way to take a picture is just use your mobile phone, take a quick picture, or you can print screen and put it on PowerPoint or something. So you have 10 seconds to do this. And 1. May I move? May I move to the next slide? I need a yes. I want consensus. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I've got my yes. So let's go to the next slide. All right. Finland and Nigeria. Okay. Nigeria, where I come from, and Finland, where this session is being hosted and many people on this call are from. Which of these dimensions do you think we will need to pay attention to in order to foster trust and collaboration? Which of these dimensions do you think we need to pay attention to? So look at the previous slide, which you have on your phone or wherever you have it, and look at this slide, and then you can type in the chat box which dimensions we should pay attention to. Which dimensions? Anyone? Power distance. Faith says power distance hierarchy. Okay. Faith, would you care to elaborate a bit more? Sarah says everything except uncertainty avoidance. Okay. Okay. And Sarah, perhaps you could elaborate a bit more. Why did you say everything except uncertainty avoidance? And what could be the challenges that we could face?
Well, I was more thinking about all the other aspects that they are different. I mean, for Finland and Nigeria, like power distance is quite a big difference. And indulgence and masculinity, individualism. So since there's a big difference, it might be that we are drawn to relate to people in a different way. And maybe uncertainty avoidance is quite similar. So maybe it doesn't need so much attention.
Thank you, Sarah. And Faith has typed in more. Faith said that because the gap is the greatest, there's a greater chance of misunderstandings and conflict on power distance. Thank you so much, Faith and Sarah. For everyone else, I hope you don't mind. I would have to continue again because of time. Let's take a look at some of the dimensions that could affect it. Some of the dimensions that could affect it. Okay, so what do we see? Power distance. Very correct. Power distance, individualism, masculinity, long-term orientation. We put that in amber, and also indulgence as well in amber as well. Why power distance? Just like Faith and Sarah said, hierarchy. We could have issues regarding hierarchy. Okay, Fini said, Miriam on Facebook said power distance and masculinity. And those gaps are the biggest actually. We have 34 points over here, and power distance, we have about 47 points difference. Okay, so these are some of the issues. Relationships will be important when we look at individualism. Relationships will be important. The Nigerians would like to know you first before they can trust you. The Finns, on the other hand, most likely could give you trust immediately, and then they will trust you until you break the trust. With the Nigerians, on the other hand, once we know you, we trust you. Even if you break the trust, we will make excuses for you, as in we would say to ourselves that, well, we're sure that you probably made a mistake and we can still trust you again. But perhaps the Finns may not be able to do that. And then look at masculinity as well. Nigeria is a more masculine society compared to Finland. So the Nigerians perhaps might want to sell themselves better than the Finns. And perhaps the Finns might be a bit more modest. And then when somebody from Finland talks to us, we may not trust them because we can't see what they have done. So it's always important to note that this is statistical. It is very likely because, again, if you remember, we talked about human nature, culture, and personality. When we're dealing with individuals, individuals might be different from the norm. So we're talking about how you work in such societies. And we will practicalize that when we talk about the Culture Compass Review. Before we go into the Culture Compass Review, I don't know if there are any questions. If there are any questions, we would like to just quickly take them before we look at the Culture Compass Review. So questions going once, going twice. Any questions? Going once, questions. Going twice. Questions from Facebook, Fee, Angelina, Fee, anybody? Questions? Okay. So we'll take a look at the Culture Compass, and we want to say a big thank you to Sophia, who has shared her Culture Compass with us. Thank you again, Sophia. We will be looking at some of the dimensions in here. For those of us who haven't done the Culture Compass yet, the Culture Compass is an elaborate report, about 49 pages. It will give you information about this model. It will also tell you how to read the report as well, to give you information on how to read it. But for this session, again, because of time, we will focus only on Sophia and her relationship with Finland. Specifically, we'll be looking at her home country versus Finland and her own preferences versus Finland. So those are the things that we will be looking at today. All right. So let us look at Sophia's home country and Finland. For this one as well, we will look at power distance and we will look at individualism. Those are the two that we will look at because of time. As you can see, those two are key areas where there are significant differences. As you can see, Ethiopia scores around 70 on power distance, whereas Finland scores about 33. And you can see as well with individualism. And we'll get into the rest of it, excuse me, in due time. So let's look at power distance. Finland versus Ethiopia. The difference is about 37 points. So we will give general advice to people from Ethiopia when you are working with people from Finland. So if you're from Ethiopia, you're working with people from Finland, some general advice to you. If you're working as a subordinate, don't judge people on their appearances, on their privileges or status symbols. Your superiors will expect you to work autonomously and will delegate responsibilities. You are expected to react to changes autonomously as well. And then let me just pick up one more, the third to the last point here. Your promotion will depend on your performance and achievement, not on how many years you've spent on the job or how much experience that you have. So of course, these are just some of the pieces of advice that we would give. You would see the rest of them in the full report, and you can read them, of course, for yourself as well. Okay. Supposing you're working as a colleague, how would you work with your colleagues? If you're coming from Ethiopia and you want to work with your colleagues, again, the Culture Compass gives some information, and I'll just take two of them. I'll take two of the tips for you. Your team members would like to know you in an informal manner. So be ready to invite them, for instance, to your home for a coffee or something. Take responsibility for assigned tasks, and I'm reading the third to the last. Take responsibility for the tasks assigned to you and execute them independently. And then the last one, remember that decision making will be a slower process compared to what you are used to in Ethiopia. Because before you make a decision, you will need to consult many people across the hierarchy. You need to consult everyone because everyone would have an input. And because the power distance is not there, everybody would feel that their input should be considered. So expect that decision making will take a while. You just don't go to the boss and then you get a sign off. The boss himself or herself might ask you to go and see other members of your team and get their sign off as well. And that could take a while. What if you are a superior? If you're a manager, if you're the boss, you're from Ethiopia and you're going to Finland and you're the boss, what should you expect? Well, you should expect to be judged on what you do, not on who you are, and you should also judge others in the same manner. In other words, your position would probably matter less in Finland compared to when you were back home in Ethiopia. All right? Look at this point right in the middle. Subordinates can veto and discuss your decisions. They will not necessarily take your decisions as you have given them. They can veto them. They can say no, and they can refuse straight to your face that they don't want to do that. Also, remember that promotions will depend on performance and achievement, not on your seniority and experience as well. So these are some of the tips that we will give to somebody going from Ethiopia to Finland, and you'll be working as a superior, working as a manager. It's important to know some of these things, because if you are not aware, it could create a sort of a culture clash between you and the people that you're working with. Okay, now this next one is it's on power distance, and this is specific for Sofia. Now, Sofia is, quote and unquote, she is not a typical Ethiopian. And why do I say that? She scored 15 on power distance. Now, what does this mean? Sofia, as an individual, prefers, and I'll use the words carefully, she prefers a situation where there is lower power distance. That's what Sofia prefers. So she scored 15 on power distance, whereas Finland scores 33. So some advice for Sofia, as someone, excuse me, who prefers lower power distance than the country she's going to. Sofia, when you're working with people from Finland, as a subordinate, you might get demotivated when you have found out that your direct boss is neither interested in the situation you find yourself in here and now, nor in the situation that your family finds itself in back home. Okay? And then you can see the other pieces of advice as well for Sofia. So this is for Sofia directly. Again, like we said, this is based on Sofia's profile because of what she said she prefers. However, because she has lived in Ethiopia for so long, for most of her life, I would expect, it is very likely that even though she prefers to work in a lower power distance context, because she has lived and worked in Ethiopia for a long time, it's very likely that her initial reactions will be similar to most of the other people living in Ethiopia. Some advice for Sofia when she's trying to relate to her colleagues. I'll just take number 2. Sofia, you might get frustrated by becoming aware that your colleagues are not giving honest feedback to the boss and or project manager. I like Miriam's point. Miriam said something, and I just want to quickly highlight it. She said, this highlights an important aspect, the need to promote that and have your work and results visible rather than just your degrees. Yeah, very important, because when you're coming from a high power distance context, your degree is important, the number of degrees you have. But when you go to a low power distance context, what you tend to see is that your degrees could actually be disregarded. It could be disregarded because that status does not immediately earn you power in a low power distance society. Okay, Sofia, when you're working as a boss in Finland, all right, I will take number 3. You may demotivate your subordinates by not controlling them frequently. Okay, so this is for you because you said you prefer lower power distance than Finland. But like I said, because you are used to working and living in Ethiopia, it is very likely that your immediate reaction will be from the perspective of somebody who's trying to deal with people from Ethiopia. So this might be different for you because, like I said, you are not quote unquote a typical Ethiopian, if there's any such thing as that. All right, let's just take a look at individualism. And this time around, we will not look at Sofia's own personal feedback, but we will compare Ethiopia and Finland on individualism. So if you're coming from Ethiopia and you're going to Finland, what do you need to be aware of? When you're working in a place like Finland, with higher individualism, a higher score on individualism, again, remember that this is about comparisons and there's no good or bad. It's all about how do you relate to people from a different culture. If you're working as a subordinate, you need to appreciate that there's a division between social and work life. Communication will tend to be more open and direct. and it will also be perhaps a bit freer. As we say, you would expect to have low context communication, not high context communication. Not much will be hidden or implied. They would expect to communicate with you clearly and directly. All right. So if you're coming from Ethiopia and you're working with people in Finland, so this is just a comparison for you. All right. By the time you compare Finland and the US, you might have different pieces of information. So this is specifically for people who are coming from Ethiopia, trying to work with people in Finland. All right. And we will encourage you to initiate conversations to build relationships with colleagues on the job. All right. And then also for you, focus first on your task, and then you can build relationships afterwards. Okay. And then let's look at when you're working with your colleagues, people on the same level with you. I'll take the first one. Do not depend on the group for answers. As an individual, you are expected to work on your own and use your own initiative. And then also I'll take the last one. Individual opinions are important. Expect to be asked for your own personal opinion and expect others as well to express theirs. So we would expect you to be vocal, to take initiative, and to speak up when you are coming in from Ethiopia and you're working in Finland. And then if you're coming from Ethiopia and you're going to be a boss in Finland, you're going to be a manager, or you're going to be holding a position of authority, expect your subordinates to disagree with you explicitly. They're going to be quite vocal when they don't agree with you. And then look at the last one. Avoid anything that resembles favoritism. So these are just some pieces of advice that you can take and you can implement as well. Of course, like I said, when you read your Culture Compass reports, you would see a lot of advice. But that advice is machine generated. I'll be more than glad to take some more time to talk to you. Yes, yes, indeed. And it's very likely that you would see the scores for Ethiopia will be quite similar to other African countries. But so that we will not generalize, it's important for you to get your own culture compass, indicate your home country or your country of origin, and you will get advice that is tailored to you. But the culture compass is just one of the resources that we have. We have other resources, but if you are part of this session and you have downloaded your culture compass, I will be happy to spend a few minutes with you. You can, of course, contact me via LinkedIn or via Think Africa. I'll be happy to spend a few minutes with you to go through your culture compass if you would like us to. But then this brings us to the end of my presentation. I would like to get some questions from any of us here, or perhaps even take one or two reflections from people if there are no questions. So I will start with questions and answers. Is there anybody here that has a question? And if you don't have a question, but you would like to reflect on a point, just like some of us have been doing during the course of this session, please feel free to do so. Thank you very much, Carrie. Carrie says it's very interesting and enlightening. Thank you very much, Carrie. Any other reflections, questions before we completely wrap up today's session? Questions, reflections, reactions? Thank you, Faith. Faith says she agrees. Fascinating. Thank you. Questions, reflections? Thank you, Sophia. Message received. Will I do the power distance thing from Nigeria and ask someone directly to give me some feedback? Should I do that? Thank you. Thank you. I think perhaps I shouldn't. Okay. Yussi says very interesting as well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. So a few takeaways as we wrap up. Please remember, when you're dealing with a multicultural or multinational group, put yourself in someone else's shoes. Seek first to understand before being understood. Respect the other culture. Respect the other culture. Understand that cultural differences are there. And it's important to appreciate the fact that those differences will exist. When you come with that standpoint, then it's easier to resolve intercultural differences and challenges. Remove your cultural glasses. Tend to look at things from the other person's perspective. Understand the rationale behind behaviors in another culture. And this will help you understand people better, and you will be less likely to be upset by their behavior once you understand it. I will give you a very simple example. Those of us who are from Nigeria, perhaps if there's any other Nigerian on this call, might be able to corroborate what I am saying. We are known to talk very loudly in Nigeria, to raise our voices. Someone once asked me, why is it that Nigerians talk so loud? And I told him that, well, we've been through so many years of military oppression and we need to be heard. So once you understand that Nigerians generally speak very loud, okay, Carrie says a point. So once you understand that Nigerians speak very loud, then it's easy for you to understand Nigerians. Easy for you to understand Nigerians. Okay, I have a question from Miriam. She says, any advice on changing one's behavior or perception? For instance, if a Finnish company is going to Nigeria, how could they learn to not be modest, so to speak? Good question. Good question. I think I will take that before I wrap up the other piece of advice. So one of the things that we normally would advise is always work with a local partner. You need a mediator, you need a go-between, somebody who appreciates both cultures, right? But then if you use our culture compass, it could also give you specific advice on how to relate to Nigerians. And I would not be generalistic on this one. I wouldn't give general advice, but a few things perhaps that you want to do, to recognize. One of the major areas where we have differences between Nigeria and Finland, masculinity. Nigeria is a masculine society compared to Finland. So when you are coming to Nigeria, you need to talk a good game, as they say. You need to sell yourself. Okay, you need to be out there, and you need to make an emphatic statement. Nigerians tend to appreciate power dressing a lot. So when you're making your presentations, ensure to have your suit and your and your pockets. Catch it. All right. Make a strong statement. Okay. They would look at not only your dressing, they would look at the kind of car you drive in Nigeria as well. And I tell you, that's very true. In Finland, when I visited Finland, one of the things I noticed, and I say this with a lot of admiration, I noticed in Finland, you can't tell apart where the rich people and the poor people live. You don't have the so-called highbrow neighborhoods. At least I didn't see them. The highbrow neighborhoods and then the rundown areas. I didn't see them in Finland, you know. And in all my travels across Europe, I noticed that I found, if I would say, perhaps the fewest number of homeless people in Finland, my experiences as a Nigerian speaking. But if you're coming to Nigeria, perhaps you want to accentuate that you're successful. You need to show it. Nigerians will look first and see whether you're successful before they would, yes. Yes, so Carrie has actually corroborated what I said. She said, the rich avoid being noticed. It's not fashionable. In Nigeria, even if you're not rich, you need to show that you are successful. Your dressing is very important. Okay. Sarah says, I now also wonder about the need to focus on the long term in face of climate change. How does one then communicate this to people from short-term oriented countries? That's a very good point. And, you know, without trying to basically generalize, perhaps this might be one of the key issues behind the US elections, for instance. The US is a short-term oriented country, just like Nigeria and like most of Europe as well. So issues about climate change, it depends on your perspective. Even some long-term societies, long-term oriented societies, depending on how they see that particular issue, except when you sell it to them as something that could endanger their future prosperity, or the prosperity of the generations to come. When they appreciate that, then perhaps they might be able to take the initiative on that. So for long-term or short-term oriented societies. Thank you. So I will go on. Understand the rationale behind the behavior in one culture. Understand why people are doing what they are doing. Once you understand it, then it's easier for you to appreciate them, to tolerate them, and to collaborate with them. Remember our 6 dimensions of culture: power distance, individualism versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity versus femininity, long-term orientation versus short-term orientation, indulgence versus restraint. Remember those. These cultural dimensions will impact the level of trust within teams, and then you build trust by understanding each other and working through your cultural differences. I want to thank everybody who has been on this call. Thank you so much for coming here. Sophia is going to share a link to a feedback form. It will take you only 2 minutes to fill this form, and we would really appreciate your feedback. I would love to hear from you. Please connect with me either by email or on LinkedIn. I will look forward to hearing from you. Sophia, I think, has just posted the link now. Sophia, are you posting the link? And thank you too, Carrie. Thank you. Thank you. So Sophia has just posted the link. Please click on the link. Thank you, Sarah. Much appreciated. You're welcome. Please click on the link and give us some feedback. The feedback would help us to improve future sessions. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Faith. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating. Look forward to hearing from you. And if you also would visit our sites, you can see the links over there for Think Africa. There are a lot of resources that you can use. Please feel free to visit Think Africa's website, thinkafrica.fi, and Hofstede Insights as well, hofstede-insights.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the social media handles that you can think of. You can just type in Hofstede Insights and you will see us there. And I will look forward as well to connecting with you on LinkedIn. Just look for Okechukwu Okere or Okey Okere, and you would find me on LinkedIn. I look forward to connecting with you. Thank you, everyone. Sophia, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and thank you, Okey, our dearest member, for this presentation. I hope people got a lot out of it. One member from Facebook actually asked if you could fill the Cultural Compass report, and okay, if it's okay with you, maybe I can send him the report, and he can you can use your free code to do that.
Yes,
Is it okay?
please. Yes, please. The code will be available for just 1 more week after today.
That, yes.
So, yes. So by the end of Thursday, is it Thursday or today? Today is Wednesday, right? So by next Wednesday, midnight next Wednesday, you will not be able to access it. Midnight Helsinki time. Next Wednesday, you will be able to access it again.
Yes, that will be good. And if you have, remember to, I think we will send them the presentation, right? To their emails. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
You will get a copy of the presentation. Yes, please.
Yeah. So if you would like, as Okey said, like a bit of description of your own Compass report, you can email to Okey also, of course. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope we get to see you in another event of Think Africa Week. We still have a few events left, and yeah, have a good evening.